Now let's get back to some other domestic policy issues here in the lead up to this month's budget, and Labor's got itself into a hell of a tangle over tax cuts. The debates focus on those stage 3 tax cuts. They are already legislated under the coalition. Labor voted for those in opposition and it promised to keep them in the election campaign. If the government backflips and breaks this promise, surely it'll fatally break their trust with the electorate. Here's the Deputy Prime Minister, Richard Marles, today.
Our position on tax has been clear and we have not changed that position since the election. What we have been pointing out in the course of the last week is that there are real pressures on the budget going forward. I mean, given rising inflation, every dollar of debt that Peter Dutton has left us is now more expensive.
Let's bring in the former Queensland Labor Party Secretary, Cameron Milner. He's the Director of GXO Strategies. Good to talk to you again, Cameron. You wrote about this in The Australian. For a position that has not been changed, there's been a lot of stuff floated by various Labor spokespeople recently, especially the Treasurer Jim Chalmers. Surely Labor cannot afford politically to break this promise.
That's right, Chris. I mean, there's been so many kites being flown. There's been backbenchers with opinions. There's been media briefings. But the Treasurer, who is supposedly the second most powerful person in the Albanese government, has been out there promoting this. He's been fanning the fire in terms of this debate. He wants to have a conversation, but what he's actually doing is undermining a solemn promise that Anthony Albanese took to the Australian people. Not only did he vote for that legislation to keep stage 3 tax cuts, but he actually promised people in May, and that promise has got to be kept. Otherwise, he'll do untold damage to his trustability in the electorate.
Now, there's a Machiavellian twist in what you wrote about today, and that is you're saying if this promise was broken, it would do a lot of damage to Anthony Albanese, and that might actually help Jim Chalmers take over as Prime Minister at some stage. But surely both of them would suffer a hell of a lot of a breach of faith with the electorate.
Anthony Albanese is the one who's gone out there and said Paul Keating's LAW tax cuts. He's the one on the record as the leader saying he's committed to doing this. What I've seen the last week or even 3 weeks is the Treasurer's been crab walking on this. He's been making lots of comments about how he'd put the economy over politics. He's been virtue signalling and trying to climb the high moral ground ahead of his October 25 budget. It's just interesting to see how far he's moved and, in so doing, expose the Prime Minister's solemn promise to the Australian people.
Now, the economics of this are fascinating, of course, because these tax cuts are a couple of years away. They're not going to fix anything to do with the budget now. But clearly what's happening here is Jim Chalmers and others are worried about recurrent expenditure in the years ahead, worried that they won't be able to cut back on expenditure enough, and they want as much tax in the future as they can so that they can actually point to an improving budget over time, right?
Oh, look, we've known about these. I mean, these are tax cuts that were proposed in 2018, voted for in 2019, and to be executed in 2024. These have been known about. So's the $1 trillion worth of debt. These were all known when Labor committed to a small target strategy and promised to do very little in government and change very little from the Morrison government. These were all known. You can't now change the narrative without breaking the promise after the election. And if that's what they want to do, there'll be electoral consequences, especially for the Prime Minister.
Spot on, Cameron. Thanks for joining us. Cameron Milner there,
Thanks so much,
former
Chris.
Labor Party advisor. And on this topic, I cannot disagree with him at all. It would be a fatal move for Labor to mess with these tax cuts.